Welcome to the podcast, Kay. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I love your LinkedIn headline, connecting talent with talent. So, can you just introduce yourself, explain that headline, and I'd love to talk about everything you know with talent acquisition, with the 9 to 5 plan, everything.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I took a look at some of the interviews you've done and just very impressive guests. And so I feel very honored to be here. I have been in the talent acquisition for over 20 years. Did that at a large company. Then I went to work with search firms. I've done it for a while on the contingency side as well as on the retained side. I've had my own firm. I've also worked with big brands such as Heidrick and Struggles. And then more recently, I've been focused a lot more working with private equity firms, private investors, portfolio companies. So yeah, it's been a very interesting career that has taken a lot of turns.
Yeah. So, why talent acquisition? So, what drew you to that, and what are some of the lessons you've learned along the way in the field of talent acquisition?
Sure. I mean, talent acquisition is something I actually just fell into. As you know, I was a pre-med student at SMU, and at that time, and I think a lot of Asian parents are still this way, but they expect their kids to either become engineers or doctors. So selected pre-med. But as soon as I graduated, I knew I wanted to go into business. And so I ended up getting a job at this large technology company in Dallas, and what we were doing was just so unusual, which is we were starting doing a startup in a very large company, trying to build something that would help them to really move more towards services versus just being in the hardware side. And so we built a consulting practice. When I joined, there were less than 30 employees, and within 3 years, we grew it to 3,000. So we had to really get really, really good at attracting talent, assessing, helping them to develop, and also just, be productive overall. Talent, I did not study talent acquisition in college, but I had, being a science major, I, had really good research skills and I knew how to ask questions. And those are the things that are just really important as you're assessing and evaluating talent.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the key skills? I mean, going along with what you just said in talent acquisition, that you think someone would either should have to be successful or should look at developing to become successful in talent acquisition?
Yeah. Um, I really think so. Anyway, talent acquisition is like a relatively new career, and
Mhm.
so people do strive to go into that profession, whereas before it's just something that you learned how to do while you were a manager. And so I still think that that's really true. If you want to move into talent acquisition, it's really best to spend some time in business or whatever, industry or function that you're interested in and learn how to see the importance of what talent does, how it can be detrimental or how it can help to, make the business successful. Then go into talent acquisition, whatever that means. Is it finding talent internally in a company, or is it finding talent for other companies, like being an executive search, for example? Um, it is you can, like graduating from college, you could go into talent acquisition, but I wouldn't recommend it because then you're like, it's more like being a technician. Whereas, like, if you had the business experience, then you can actually be a better partner to hiring managers and you can, advise them in ways like they may just say, oh, I need, this person, but you can say, well, what do you want to do with your department? What's your strategy? What are you trying to accomplish, et cetera? And you can have a higher level conversation and then decide, well, do you need a full-time person to come and do this? Or could you hire an interim person? Or do you just need someone to come in and help upgrade the skills so that other people can also, contribute to the success? So you can have those questions, higher level discussions, which oftentimes is very difficult if you
Mhm.
don't have the business experience.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And my actual podcast before this was with a recruiter He runs a big staffing agency out of New
Uh-huh.
York, and something that we were talking about was talent acquisition. You know, like finance and marketing are these big terms people throw around, but there's actually very specific. I call them like I guess niches within talent acquisition. So the positions you're actually recruiting for and advising to bring on. So what were some of the positions that you helped, I guess, to bring on and recruit for within talent acquisition?
Yeah, so for most part, because I started my career in technology and in
Mhm.
consulting, that's really where my focus was. And so, and it was great because really, just the whole area of technology is relatively new. I mean, I can remember when AOL came to being. And when I entered into talent acquisition, we didn't have LinkedIn and we faxed everything. We had to like actually hire these corporate spies to call into companies to find out who's who and what they did. But all of that was exciting, and so it is, it's very different now, and it's still very much about being able to connect with people and just going back to your early question about connecting talent with talent, that's what I feel like, how I work with my clients is that I am just connecting them to other talent.
Yeah. 100%. And I like how you bring up LinkedIn, where for me, when I think about the ways to, whether for me from like breaking into a company to network with people, I just think of LinkedIn. I'm sure the strategies have changed over the years. And so
Mhm.
would you say now that from what you've seen, LinkedIn is really commonplace for like them, one of the main, if not the main strategies to actually network and to get into these companies or even to recruit if you are like the talent acquisition specialist to recruit into your company?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of recruiters use LinkedIn, and there's no way of really operating without doing that unless you're just recruiting for very specific positions. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're recruiting for a board and you know that you need to recruit a CEO for it, you don't necessarily go onto LinkedIn. A lot of them are going to be on, LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
it is a really important tool. One of the reasons actually I started the 9 to 5 plan though is because I felt like, hey, I was around when LinkedIn started and it was very cool then, but what is it really doing for undergraduates and postgraduates? And is the way the algorithms are, like LinkedIn is useful if you have a lot of experience, right? There's just some kind of data there, 5 years of experience doing this or that employers can capture, but it doesn't. So it is, there's still, I think LinkedIn still, it has a lot of benefits, but it can, almost not be your friend if you don't have enough experience. Having said that, one piece of advice that I've been giving over and over again is make sure you're on your LinkedIn profile that it says 500 plus connections. The other thing about the way to use LinkedIn as you're building your network is that if you are trying to make yourself known, you're trying to make good connections in a certain industry, right? That first LinkedIn connection request is going to be the hardest, right? Because you don't have any mutual acquaintance, right? And there's nothing in your profile that might show that you have any kind of presence or that someone knows you in that industry. But if you have a way of connecting to several people in a certain industry or field that you're interested in, all of a sudden the connections get
Mhm.
easier because you're popping up as having mutual connections in several different areas. So that's something I think maybe students aren't really. There are a lot of people. Honestly, I mean, I've spoken with a lot of professionals who don't really think about that, and it makes a huge difference to help you accelerate your network.
Yeah, and I also think in terms of college students, I could speak on this one for myself and I guess my inner circle of friends, where LinkedIn is not as entertaining of a platform. I know it's a social media, but it's not like an Instagram or a TikTok or a
Yeah,
Snapchat or whatever kind of basic social media platforms you would think about, where it's not optimized, in my opinion, towards getting like enjoyment of the content, right? It's
right.
different. It's TikTok is their sole purpose is to make sure you have the most engaging content, where LinkedIn feels like it's networking first, like effectiveness first. in terms
Yeah.
of getting out there and meeting people, and then content second, which makes it interesting because I feel like students don't want to think about it or use it because it's quote unquote boring, I think. But at the end of
Uh-huh.
the day, it's where, in my opinion, the deals are being made, the people are being met. And so I definitely
Yeah.
think you're 100% right that people should be getting on there.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the content isn't very interesting for, this generation, but certainly a lot. I mean, I see a lot of, experienced professionals on LinkedIn. They use it, almost like Facebook,
Yeah.
right? And so, it's, it's just kind of where you are in your career. But definitely, I think that, there are other opportunities for postgrads on LinkedIn as well as a lot of other emerging platforms.
Yeah. And so I guess we could talk about the 925 plan because we're segmenting it from LinkedIn and helping college students really break into the careers they want. So for the audience who might not know, can you explain what the 925 plan is and some of your offerings?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. But before I get into it, I'd love to hear like how you're planning for your career. I know you have an unusual career, but I also would love to hear like how, your friends and peers are planning. Like what kind of services do they use? What are they, where do they go to think about what's going on after college?
Yeah. So I can't speak for every college student, but I can speak for especially the ones at SMU. I have a lot of friends at U Miami, kind of like those very popular schools in like maybe the East Coast or like the Midwest.
Hmm.
And I think the resources are diversified. I think a lot of people are using like one there, like the Heidi Career Center at SMU or a lot of the career centers at their colleges, because I think so a lot of schools have very large endowments and they build these programs up. So they do a decent job. I think college students, I can speak for myself as well. It's a little hard to maintain the discipline of actually going to them. So let's just say they offer resume consultations. Well, you still have to show up there 3 times a week over maybe 3 weeks to get a good resume done. And
Hmm.
so that
Yeah.
takes a level of discipline that it's actually hard to go out there and do it. So I'd say the career centers, I think there's a lot of online services, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Hmm.
I've seen like a lot of ones it's like VMOC, for example. I know partners with some colleges, they develop resumes. Obviously LinkedIn in terms of networking. For interview prep, I haven't really seen a main platform for interview prep. I could be completely wrong, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen a mainstream one that I see people using. They really just practice with their friends.
Hmm.
And and yeah, and I think for cover letters, usually those get factored into the resume services. And again, I think across the board, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're being looked at as a little less, I say like essential or required. And so
Yeah.
I think resumes and cover letters kind of get packaged together. And so if you're helping with someone with the resume, they'll throw in the cover letter as well for the service. But yeah, those are kind
Hmm.
of the main ways I see people doing it. And the main thing is, and I know you're going to talk about this for a 9 to 5 plan, is I think there's an abundance of good resources out there and a lot of
Yeah.
great knowledge. I mean, the internet can show you everything you want. I think
Hmm.
like I listened to this guy Alex Hermosi who explains that the value is in the distillation, not the creation, meaning like all the information's out there, but it's about
Hmm.
having like someone explain it and distill it to a very like small format. Like this,
Yeah.
these are the actual steps you need to take. So I think
Right.
for college students, I think if we had someone to point the way and say, that's what you got to do, I think that would be super valuable for us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, Chat GPT AI is just such a tremendous resource, right? In terms of being able to get some clear steps on how you should approach things. Um, well, kind of the 9 to 5 plan really came through very quickly, although it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Literally, we launched this about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So we are, I think for most part, I think this is a solid plan, the plan for 9 to 5. But I'm also just learning a lot and pivoting, and all of this is just happening very fast and also opening up some really exciting opportunities as well. Um, but I just been thinking that it would be really cool to package like everything I've learned working with professionals in all areas. I mean, I started off working with senior technology executives and consultants and auditing firms, and then went into corporate finance and sales and HR and, on and on, even, even helped a cannabis grower company hire a social media person, right? And so, like, how do I package all of that so that it is accessible to undergraduates? I mean, because that's really when you want to know all this. And there isn't necessarily a way. I just don't think there are good resources out there right now. So it's like, so the part of 925 is like, creating a cheat sheet for undergraduates and postgraduates of here are just some really essential things that you need to be thinking about and working on, and we can help you identify ways to work on this in a way that's comfortable for you so that you are prepared. The other thing is, even the job market is really great right now, it's still incredibly competitive. And as if you don't plan for something, it's just not going to happen. And it's so hard to plan for things like this when you're in college, when you're living your best life, right? But that job is not waiting for you. I think parents are under the assumption that colleges are preparing their students for careers, and that's really, I'm sure some colleges will be upset about this, but that's not the case. I mean, part of what they're doing is helping a person to move on to their career, but a lot of what they're doing has to do with, helping you to graduate successfully. So there's still this huge gap, and also statistics show that, a lot of parents are really involved with their students the first, second year. They want to make sure that they're in the right dorm, that they have enough to eat, and all those basic essentials, and then they actually become their engagement rate goes down in the third and fourth year. That's when it should go up, because that's when you as a parent really need to be thinking about, like, oh, my kid, are they applying for internships? If they don't get into internship, how are they going to get the experience that they need? Are they learning about, how to care for themselves and be independent? And parents, it doesn't matter where they are. I'm seeing a lot of first generation student parents being more and more engaged as well too. So it doesn't matter where they are on the economic scale, or in their experience. They can really play a huge role in helping their child to find a great position afterwards. Um, I wanted to, I wanted to also, make these resources available in a way that's affordable for most people. So, it was a good percentage, probably, not a ton of kids, but a good percentage of students probably could afford private coaching. But I don't know. I mean, private coaching can be very expensive, right? And so it is not affordable for a lot of people. I mean, even at $99, that's probably not that affordable for a lot of people as well, but definitely a lot cheaper than paying, $200, $300 an hour. And also, I don't know if we talked about this too, but as we were really thinking about, like, how do we make this more affordable, it really started to accelerate the need for an app that people can go to and have access to a lot of these resources, and have ways to take some assessments that would be helpful for them to learn, and to give them some direction and guidance as to kind of what their needs and requirements and wants are in developing a career. So, planning is really important. Again, parents just don't think that that they need to help their students with this, because this is what colleges do. But, colleges are focused on something else. I also want to, the other thing about 925 is that, I mean, over the years, I've loved the jobs I've had. And some of them I worked at companies, others I've created for myself. I loved my first job at the tech company. And one thing I'm hearing over and over again is that most people really think of work as a four-letter word. And it really shouldn't be that way. I mean, it really, when you're thinking about graduating from college, you should be thinking about like how you're going to be independent, kind of like when you got your first car and how, how you're going to be able to go do something, use the degree that you have, and to be able to apply it to make new friends, to have new adventures, etc. And that's what I want, people to think about the 9 to 5 plan. It enables them to do that. And also, I love the I love like the 9 to 5 plan. It's like putting together a portfolio, right? Like a financial portfolio. And a lot of times people work because they want to make enough money to do the things they want to do in life, and also to have some retirement money to enjoy it. So that's what that's about, is like being, investing in yourself, investing in your career. And that's why the gift card is, can you read that? It says early
100%.
investor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're an early investor in yourself. And so let me show you also. So the gift card box comes in this
Oh,
thing,
I like the
and you
packaging.
open it up, and there's a brochure in it about what the 9 to 5 plan is. You get your gift card, you get these little stickers that you could put on wherever, on your iPhone, wherever.
Mhm.
And then as the back of the gift card is a little brochure and an AI generated picture of myself, which I encourage everyone to do. I mean, the technology is available.
Yep.
And then I wanted to show you this is
Oh,
the nine
wow.
to five customized Yeti tumbler, right? Isn't this cool? And if
Yep.
white isn't your color, wait, I'll also have it in this charcoal.
I
So
like it.
which one do you like more? Because I'm
I think
sending
I
you,
like I think I like the charcoal one, and I'll definitely
yeah,
use it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I like the charcoal one too.
Yeah. I think a lot of digital businesses, I was reading something about this, would really be better off also adding physical products to their business, because it gives you something to actually hold and see, rather
Yeah.
than it gets it feels a little more authentic when you have something to hold. Like, all of Job Toast is online, and so there's no
Hmm.
physical products or anything physical to it. So I was actually thinking of, like, my friend who runs a business bought a hat that said his company name on it. So he wears it in his interviews now. And so,
Yeah.
thinking of getting a physical product. So I like the Yeti mug.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fun. And I think most of us, like in our kind of in during this time, we like merchandise,
Mhm.
And so I mean we like swag. And so the gift card, just also too, I mean, just to just be transparent about like some of the challenges is that because this is a new concept and it's based on a gift card, it's not like I'm hiring a coach. I'm hiring Kay as my coach, and then I pay her, per hour. It's more like, oh, I buy my, student this gift card, and will they use it or not? Well, I mean, you buy your student all kinds of gift cards to make sure that they eat, they get one place to another safely. So why not a 9 to 5 plan gift card so that they have it available at that moment when they have an opportunity to do something and they need expert advice, they can use their gift card, right?
So is the premise similar to, like, if familiar with Dave and Buster's, right? So instead of you
Uh-huh.
going in and inserting $10 per machine or $5, you actually go in the front and you buy all the chips, and so you transact I guess it's like the gift card. I think it's actually a card. You put the
Yeah.
card in the machine rather than actually giving dollars per
Yeah.
transaction, right? It's a kind of a similar concept.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's so funny that you mentioned Dave and Buster's. I know it wasn't anything that you and I share, but that's where my husband and I met at Dave and Buster's
Oh, wow.
at
Yeah.
Walnut Hill and Central. So that has a special place in my life.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's like that. It's kind of like as a parent, you're buying a little bit of an insurance policy, for your student. And you buy it because you also want them to, think about like how planning is important and you care about them. And so that you want them to be able to access an expert. But as far as the coaches are concerned, it's not just myself. I do have a small team now, and the way we're going to recruit coaches are they're going to be adjunct professors. Most universities, half of their professors are adjunct professors, and these are, there's some really good people with just amazing career experience, and they obviously love to work with college students. And so, I every adjunct professor I've spoken to loves this idea. And the gift card concept, the reason it's affordable and we can actually build a business around it is that unfortunately, most gift cards, the redemption rate is under 80%, sometimes 30%. Our goal is to make sure that anyone who receives a gift card, that they take the opportunity to use it because it will make a huge difference in their life. But, the model allows us to actually pay coaches the market rate, right? And so I know I'm finding that some people are having a little difficulty understanding that because they're still thinking of like, how do you do this for $99? How can you afford to do it? Well, when you sell a lot of gift cards, then you have that margin. So that part, of course, the other part is too, I would assume that there will be corporate sponsors, just like, what you're doing with Job Toast. There'll be companies interested in branding. And then hopefully there'll be other partnership opportunities. I'm smiling because I actually have two major corporate partnership opportunities that I'm working on where they love this 9 to 5 plan and just the whole, concept of helping college students to become career ready.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not a business coach, but from what I do understand is a lot of the companies who charge, we'll say affordable rates, right? They're trying to make it for everyone to be able to support that margin. I see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
companies going out there and getting sponsors. So I'm repping a good cause and I think you should
Yeah.
join and they love what you're doing. And so a lot of companies would love to sponsor that, which could help a lot with the revenue to make sure that everything you're doing while it's affordable is also lucrative and you could keep running the company profitably.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to constantly reinvest in the company. There's all sorts of technology that's available. I mean, we're hoping to use AI quite a bit. I mean, AI has really enabled a lot of things that weren't available to us in the last few years.
Yeah. And what role do you think we could get tactical or surface level, depending on what you want, but what role do you think AI plays in the career development space or in job searching and whatnot? And then how have you seen people use this technology to actually forward their career?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the simple part of, being able to develop your resume is really important. AI is definitely your friend when you're, trying to figure out how do you describe some things that you did. But ultimately, the way I see AI could be beneficial for this, and we have an app development platform development team, and lately we've been talking about it a lot. Is that there are a lot of resources that are difficult to get. So let's say you have an opportunity to interview somewhere, and it's like in a space that you don't have a lot of experience or knowledge of. I mean, certainly AI can help you to you know gather information and get really smart about that space. It could also help you to really pull together kind of the right themes, taking your experience and pull together your experience so that it matches better with what that company, potential employer is looking for. So it just closes a lot of those gaps for you, but it also could just really highlight just certain requirements or certain skills that you may want to develop. So it is definitely helping people to accelerate, how they present their qualifications and talk about it. And that wasn't available before. But really, it's like any other tool, like what we were talking about, someone being on LinkedIn and having only 60 or 100 connections when they can have over 500 connections. It's, how you use it, right? And whether you use it and take advantage of it. And it all comes down to like, how motivated are you? Like, do you have the right vision to be, putting the hard work in order to achieve, the lifestyle that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that's probably a huge problem to solve within the career space is actually finding a way to one, like discover the information and deliver that to someone else, but also incentivize that of, okay, you know what to do. Now you actually need to do it. And those are obviously two different problems, but I feel like every service, every product, or I guess services in particular kind of suffer with those two things is you could actually have an
Mhm.
amazing service, but if no one uses it and you can't motivate them to actually get out of bed and go get the job or go land the interview, then it's going to be difficult. But obviously, if the 925 plan can find a good incentive structure to actually make sure, whether through accountability or whatever strategies I'm sure you guys have talked about, to make sure that students are actually going out there and fulfilling on that, I think it could be wildly successful.
Right. And it's just like there's so many different influencers and stakeholders when you're talking about a student. And
Mhm.
so it's identifying those and then trying to figure out what the messaging is for it. And so I started off thinking like this is a messaging for students, but now we're really tweaking our message to direct it to parents because parents are still very much involved. They should be involved. I mean, they're a huge asset for their students and impact on their future.
Yeah, and especially I've actually thought about this a lot as well in the career space. I think a lot of people are talking to students saying, you need to do this, this, and that, and kind of educating them on the process of how to actually go out there and land these opportunities. Now, what I think is interesting is parents, in a lot of regards, whether through connections, through what they've learned in their life, they have so much influence over their
Mhm.
child's success. Yet I feel like zero people are talking to the parents, at least from what I've seen on a mainstream level, and telling them, listen, you need to actually help your child with this part, and not that it's their responsibility, like they should be doing everything for their child, but they have so many, as I said, like connections, the knowledge, the influence over their child. So I think if you could help teach the parents in a sense how this process works and have them also be a part of it, then I think that's also
Mhm.
extremely important because they definitely do play a bigger role than I think a lot of the mainstream services I've seen play it out to be.
Yeah, no, I definitely want more parent engagement and also having worked with executives and experienced professionals, I do know there's a real gap out there too in terms of how they brand and network and how they make those transitions. So it can be a little bit difficult for them to, give, let's say, a more informed guidance to their students.
Yeah. Yeah. However you come up with it, I definitely think it would be interesting. And whether they're both on a phone call or the same,
Yeah,
email chain or whatnot, I think
right.
a lot of the lessons, the stuff we talked about with LinkedIn or with your resume or interview process, I think if the parents were involved in that process and actually let's just say it was a group call instead of talking to the student alone, if the parents were there, they might say,
Uh-huh.
wow, networking is a huge part of being a job. I actually know someone at that firm. I should probably get active in that process. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents undervalue their, I guess, yeah, they undervalue their involvement or how involved they should be in the process when they really do have a huge role to play. And I think we're going to start seeing that more often with companies like the 925 plan, helping to tell the parents to actually get involved and to be a part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. And also, now that I'm a parent of two college students, actually my oldest has graduated, is that and I'm sure this isn't just me, right? But is that you send your kid off to college and then you did all this work to get them to that college and you kind of think that they're taken care of, right? Like your job is done, they're going to go, they're going to do their studies, they're going to get all this experience, and then they're going to graduate, and then and the college is going to help them find their next job, and that is again, they do a lot of great things, but they don't necessarily help your individual student with that
Mhm.
next job. The resources are there, right? But it's still really at the end of the day, it's my responsibility as a parent to make sure that my, student is successful. Um, yeah.
No, I was
So
going to
it
say,
was really eye-awakening for me.
yeah, 100%. And I was just going to say, relating back to our conversation in the beginning, I feel like no one is disagreeing that a lot of these colleges have, pretty sufficient resources. I just think in terms of direction, I don't think that from what I've seen at my college or other colleges, they're not really sitting there and guiding you through the process. They have the resources there, but they're not actually enforcing you to go to them or to the info
Yeah.
sessions or whatnot. So I would say that they're there, but you also have to be skilled in learning how to take advantage of those resources, because just because they're there doesn't mean you know that they're there, or two, how to actually, leverage those connections or like the info sessions or whatever it might be at these colleges.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I have lots of high hopes for our app because we think that there are ways that we can gamify it. It could be a lot more social. It could be, instead of you finding your own job in your own way, in your career, it could be more of a team effort or a community effort. And, as we know, when you're doing this with a group, you're more likely to participate, be engaged, and all that. And if there are social aspects of it as well.
Yeah. And it's probably super important to the success of the app and the plan that you've actually been in talent acquisition for a long time. And I know that I've seen, and maybe not even in the career space, I've just seen people who've never done, a particular thing go out there and try to build a company around it, which, not that it doesn't get successful, it's just hard to build. And so you're probably going to see a lot of the nuance that someone who hasn't been in talent acquisition wouldn't see when looking how to build these resources out. And so I definitely think that probably plays a role, and I'm sure you could touch on that more than I could.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just so just giving you, I can just give you some really real life examples, which is, and this happens all the time, like the cover letters, sometimes it's a requirement, sometimes it's not. But when it is a requirement, it really, it's not your cover letter. It shouldn't be just a rehash of your resume, right? I mean, that's your opportunity to really talk about experience or perspective, or to ask questions, to pose questions, so that you get the attention that you need. I do want to say, I've been hearing this over and over again. How do I know if my resume is ATS compliant, applicant tracking system compliant? And and it's like, you know what? I'm sorry to tell you this. You can get it compliant. You can apply for a million jobs online, and all you're doing is you're just making it easier for the system to eliminate you. And so, if what you need to do is to start building your network, finding people who can introduce you to people at companies that you're interested in, because there's still nothing like an employee making a recommendation, right? So those are just like basic facts. And I've seen that work over and over again, as a talent acquisition professional. I do also want to mention too is that when you graduate, you are, unless you're just kind of in a very narrow group of students who have done all, everything and more, and you're well connected, your parents are well connected, and your campus is, working with the companies that you're interested in, right? Then everything should fall into place for you, right? But that is really not the case with a lot of people. And the problem is that there are a lot of hiring managers that do not want to hire recent graduates, because you just don't have enough experience, and a lot of companies don't have entry level positions as well. So it is just really important to plan and try to, get as much experience. It doesn't have to be work experience, but just get as much experience that, are necessary when you're out there.
Hmm. And just to be tactical for a second, so let's just say I was a college, we could say junior or sophomore, just kind of in that age where you're actually getting ready to apply for an internship, or maybe on a similar process, you're a senior who's looking to apply for a full-time job when you
Mhm.
graduate. And I wanted to work in, well, you could say consulting. What would be like the major steps that you think you would go along through and actually going out and acquiring that offer?
Yeah. First of all, I would definitely use the resources, call on the resources that you have available to you. And that would be career services and also your professors. If there are classes that you've enjoyed the most, and especially if your professor is an adjunct professor, this is someone who's still active in their profession and they have a tremendous network. And they also want to see you be successful. So really leverage those relationships. And then hopefully you're trying to teach yourself about that industry. So if it's consulting, well, what kind of consulting do you want to do? Do you want to do, technology consulting? What kind of industry? Is it in finance? Is it healthcare? Is it fashion? Wherever that might be, start researching and identify companies that are consulting in that space, and then start following their pages, start, figure out who works there, figure out if anyone from your school works there, and you want to start making those connections and building that network like that. And it's a lot of work. I mean, going to school is a lot of work, but trying to do something new and different requires a lot of work, and it just, requires patience. It's really about working the numbers. And when I say that, it's like you can't just make a little effort and expect something to happen. You have to make more effort and more effort. And then finally, you'll get to kind of that tipping point where things are coming to you and people are seeing you and recognizing you.
Yeah, I actually wanted to hone in on something that you mentioned real quick. In all of
Hmm.
the career development podcasts I've had, no one's ever mentioned anything about talking to the professors. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
which now that you said it, actually makes so much sense in that
uh-huh,
these adjunct professors are actually still active, like in that industry, as you said.
yeah,
And even the ones who are just primarily professors were probably active in the industry at some point. And so, um, can you elaborate more on kind of the
yeah.
importance of talking to professors and kind of the value they could provide?
Oh yeah, for sure. So years ago, I did a search for Merrill Lynch, and it was like just this really quirky search. They wanted to figure out what the succession plan would be for their campus recruiting. And so they asked me to take a look at all the campus recruiting functions and team of their competitors. So it's like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, et cetera, et cetera. And and what I mean, I learned so much from that project. But one thing I learned is if you're at a company where you have big university budgets, like campus recruiting budgets, you have access to the best talent. I mean, the school is, doing job fairs for you, things like that. But if you're at a company that has no budget for campus recruiting, which is a lot of companies and a lot of nonprofit organizations, you have to get really creative on how you're going to access talent. And one thing I've advised clients is that you have to get to know the professors at the universities that are teaching the subjects that are important to you, and you reach out to them, you find ways to connect with them, and they'll be the ones who want to see their students land in successful roles. And so they'll be willing to help you. And so now I don't know if that's the secret. I don't know. Some professors may be like, oh my God, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, right?
Hmm.
If they have a really great student or they know a student who could do well somewhere, of course they're going to help.
Hmm. And also to touch on, that was a great point, by the way, and I'm definitely going to talk about that on other podcasts as well. So I took note of that. And for the idea of campus recruiting, I've actually heard about this a lot and how the biggest companies, like the Fortune 500 companies, they all have these ginormous campus recruiting budgets to really get the best talent out of all the best colleges. And so,
Mhm.
what percentage or what portion of companies out there that people want to work at have these recruiting budgets? Is it really for only like the top 1% of companies, or is it, 50% of the companies we see out there? I know it's hard to measure, but I'm just trying to like
Yeah.
conceptualize how many companies actually have these large budgets.
I really think it's fewer companies that have those big budgets because it's not just like hiring a campus recruiter, right, and a team. But in order to really have influence, like in anything, you have to be like a major sponsor. You have, maybe, someone at an executive at your company is a big donor or something. And, I don't want to like sound like I'm like being so cynical about this, but I mean, this is kind of the reality of like how, organizations thrive. So if you're at a company like that, yeah, your company definitely has the advantage because they can pay to make their brand known. They can get all the messages out. They have the PR resources, etc. But most companies really don't, and they also just really don't quite understand the value of campus recruiting, right? And it's too much of a long-term play for them. They need, if they haven't, if you're a small company, you have an opening, you need someone right now. You don't have time to go get to know the professors and weed through, weed through students who haven't, had a lot of experience. So, but there's a real benefit to be able to develop those relationships.
Hmm.
If,
And yeah, sorry, what?
oh, if you care, if you care, if you're planning to work for a long time or you have a business that you want it to survive for a long time, you have to have campus relations
Hmm.
one way or
And
another.
yeah, and is the reason because the universities are just really good at recruiting the talent, and then obviously you want to recruit super well to your company? Like, what is the appeal to having a very large campus recruiting, I guess, budget or system?
Yeah. Well, because you do want to be able to, go to, a lot of times you want to be able to go to top ranking schools, or you want to be able to, find schools that have niche in certain areas that are important to you. For example, now because of AI, like philosophy, is really philosophy majors are really important. And I think SMU has a really good philosophy program. And in fact,
Mhm.
I remember taking one and I loved it. But I don't know how many universities would have, excellent philosophy. So you want your campus recruiters. And if you don't have campus recruiters, then you want hiring managers to start reaching out to colleges so that you have access to that talent. Because everyone started looking for philosophy majors, the competition would be incredibly difficult. But where you have relationships, that's where most likely you're going to generate success.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
yeah, I guess, one other thing I want to say though is that, sometimes, campus recruiting isn't valued as much or necessary because again, back to the point of how like things have changed so much. Technology has eliminated a lot of the entry level positions. So, oftentimes companies are looking for high, experienced hires and not going to colleges. But that's bad news for post grads because the jobs aren't out there. Um, and also, a good percentage, unfortunately, like over 30% of post grads end up working jobs that, they hadn't studied, like it doesn't match your degree and it underutilizes them,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, and we know a few people like that, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I speaking on the philosophy, kind of an interesting segue. Especially in the consulting world, right, looking at a lot of the big consulting firms, I've been seeing a lot of the people, and at least my friends who have been getting into the MBB firms, are all CS majors. I thought they would be, finance majors
Yeah.
or management majors or just something business related. But I've been
Hmm.
seeing a lot of even philosophy majors, CS majors, more out like what I would perceive as like out of the box and a little less business oriented majors actually becoming into these or entering these really successful roles. And so, from a talent acquisition perspective, what is really the logic behind that? And do you see this as like a trend that's either new or has been happening where they're really, filtering in people from other majors besides just simply finance or management or business majors?
Yeah. So, I mean, philosophy is because they're looking for people who understand, how to think analytically and in that logical manner to be able to, people who know how to ask questions, right? So that's really where AI is, right? The ability to ask good questions, to be able to prompt it. And CS, I think, finally computing degrees have become like the norm before. I mean, for a very long time, it was just only like a select group of people who self-selected to go into computing, right? And unfortunately, I don't think it was valued as much in a company. And it just really depends on a company. Is it a company that leverages technology strategically? Or is it a company that just really sees computing as kind of a back office thing, just keep the lights on, kind of that thing. But I just having worked with a lot of technology professionals who also majored in computing. I love the way they think. They're always thinking about the outcome. They think they think a little bit more structurally, but they're creative. They understand the framework, then they know how to think about it, create it, and then execute. I mean, so I'm not saying all technology people are that way,
Mhm.
but a good percentage of them are that way. And you can see how that's really beneficial in a company, but also as a consultant to be able to think that way is really beneficial to the client. The client has a problem. Like, so how do you think about that? How do you analyze and dissect that problem? What are some creative solutions? But then how do you execute? How do you execute it small, execute on or large scale? So I highly recommend, no matter what degree you're taking, to take some computing because, like, when you have this area of expertise and it's matched up with computing of some sort, it just puts you into an entirely different category.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you haven't taken any computing, I would, try to do some of it.
Yeah, I am definitely no software engineer, but I have taken one class. It was
Okay.
Python, so I've learned to code in that language. And
Okay.
a lot of my classmates who ended up continuing and having that as their major or their minor, they were saying it's not because they want to be a software engineer for the rest of their life, but it's
Right.
just the framework that you learn and how to actually
Yeah.
think and process. And coding is so logical, and just like the what you have to learn to actually be proficient in coding is so helpful in business. And those people
Yeah.
went on to work at some really good companies. So I definitely see that across the board. So that was interesting to bring up.
Yeah. I'm curious, are there any consulting companies that you're particularly interested in that you'd want to mention right now or?
No, no, yeah, no worries. I mean, I'm looking into the MBB firms and all the big firms that do management consulting. So,
Uh-huh.
um, but again, keeping my options open, given job tests and everything like that. But yeah, just going along with the process at the moment.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Reach out if you need any help.
Okay, I will. And touching on the idea of the skills you would need to succeed for college students, you can speak generally or maybe some very specific skills you think people are missing on. What
Yeah.
are some of the skills that you think college students should be focusing on? And that could be hard skills or soft skills, because as I've talked about on nearly every career development podcast, I think that soft skills are undervalued right now, but they should be highly valued because they're super important at any role. So, I'll leave the floor open to
Yeah,
you.
exactly. And the problem with soft skills is that it's just up for, different interpretation, right? And depending on what your life experience, work experiences, you may, say, oh, this person has really good soft skills, but this other person doesn't, right? And so it's, but nonetheless, soft skills are really important. That's one of the things that we want to do with our 9 to 5 app is like we want each student to create a portfolio. And so again, going with, more of this investment, financial planning type of terminology. But in your portfolio, you have your academics, your studies, you have your work experience, but also there is this bucket of soft skills or what we call the 9 to 5 life hacks that are really important and they can be measurable, right? Just like, learning how to network is a soft skill. Like you can measure it by how many connections you have, how, understanding kind of the method and the strategy for doing that. Or also soft skills can mean, someone who really understands how to interact with diverse situations and with other cultures and so forth. So there are ways to measure that too. And but I was trying to like how do I say this? But I think there are three things is that, and this is something you can work on all the time, is just learn to listen actively. I know it's, and I do think that just because you're online a lot, it doesn't mean that you you don't know how to listen. um, and I find that actually a lot of Gen Zers do listen actively, right?
Mhm.
It's really those of us Gen Xers and Boomers that we've learned to like tune out things that we don't want to hear, right? And so learning to listen actively is going to be important. Learn to ask questions. So this is what I advise. Like if you are interviewing or you have a courtesy interview or you have any opportunity to be able to connect with someone who's going to make a difference in your life, come up with at least five questions to ask them. And the questions that, don't put so much pressure on you, like this is these five awesome questions. But, the fact that you thought about something and you have a question to ask says so much more about you than what you have on your resume. Also, the other is like, learn to have difficult conversations. And I'm finding Gen Zers are really good at this because you're like on, group texts and things like that. You guys are really good at like pointing out behaviors that are unacceptable, setting up boundaries, being able to communicate like, hey, that really triggered something in me. And, I didn't like that. Whereas like my generation, I think we've done a lot to just like shove things, inwards and deal with it. So learning to have those difficult conversations and also being able to preserve those relationships, those are things that really take you from one place to another.
Yeah, you kind of touched on this interesting idea of when you're doing the interview process, another thing that I think is undervalued, which I would like you to touch on, is the idea of prepping for the interview in terms of what you know about the company. Where I could speak for a lot of myself and my friends, where I think we place a lot of time into making sure that I say the right thing or I make my resume good, but really a very small amount of time actually prepping on understanding the company. I had an interview with someone from Johnson and Johnson, and he was saying that it's super important to actually understand the company you're going to, which is it's the ultimate way to show preparation. So, how important do you think that is that, which sounds obvious, but actually understanding the company you're applying to, the role you're applying to, like maybe the history of the company, like what kind of role does that play in the process?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's just like what you did, like you researched me, and then the questions that you wanted to ask me were based on the research that you did on me. I mean, that was really impressive. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, I have this show and I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to ask, same questions I asked all the other guests. So it really shows that, you're a thinking person, you are interested in our mutual success. So, I mean, being able to research a company, looking at, what products, services, who are their clients, what's going on with them now, looking at their press releases, but also go and check out their TikTok. Most companies are on TikTok and Instagram and see, get a feel for the type of messaging that they're sending out. And then certainly if you know the name of the person that you're going to be meeting with, certainly look them up and maybe they're connected with someone and that'll make a huge difference, right? To be able to say, oh, by the way, I noticed you're connected with so and so. I know that person as well too. But also, again, come up with some good questions and ChatGPT is great for that. You can put the job description in, or you could say, I'm meeting with, this type of company about this and that. Like, what are some good questions for me to ask as a potential candidate?
Mhm. You kind of touched on the idea of networking, and obviously, I love talking about that in every podcast. So, what would you say the role of networking is? But even to be more tactical in that, like, how would someone go about networking? Because I feel like it's one of those terms that people just throw out there, like, "Oh, it's important to network," but what does that really mean? And what are some strategies people actually could do to have a good network or do good networking?
Yeah. I think you have to really think about what purpose, right? And so if it is, if it is a purpose of getting an internship, then you do want to again go back to targeting where do you want your internship at or what kind of company? And then also think about, who might be at those companies and start looking them up online and on LinkedIn and then finding. So I don't know, let's say someone wants to go work for McKinsey Consulting. Well, you might want to look and see online, on LinkedIn, who is perhaps a second or third degree connection with you. or you want to go work at McKinsey Consulting and you have a good idea of like the type of projects or clients that you want to work with, then take a look at some of their press releases or case studies and find out who's involved. Then you want to try to connect with that person. And don't be afraid to actually connect with senior people. If you see yourself as being the boss sometime in the future, you have to get really good and comfortable with connecting with the current bosses, right? Start getting really comfortable reaching out to the president of does the president of your college know you, right? And so connect with them, connect with, if you're doing an internship or anywhere, just figure out, who's in charge. And it's a simple LinkedIn or a simple whatever message to them. I really like what you're doing. Admire your company, whatever that is. It's really not that difficult, but it goes a long way. And I love that saying too, your network is your net worth. And it sounds so corny, but it really is true.
I love that. Yeah. And I say that all the time. And it is corny, but at the end of the day, it's true. So it doesn't matter if it's cliche. And so is there any final notes you'd love to leave the audience with? I know I've learned a tremendous amount and I love all the topics we touched on. And so just wanted to make sure we didn't leave anything out. I know you have a lot to share and you have a great experience with everything you've done in
Yeah.
your career.
No, I appreciate this. And I mean, I learned a lot too. And just in the short period of time that you and I met and connected, I feel like just you opened up this another world for me as well. And I would say, that's one thing too. Like if you can think about ways that the other person learns from you, you'll be a lot more impressionable and memorable to them too, because I think we all kind of get stuck in where we are. And so that's what I try to do, with my firm and my interactions with people. It's like I want to like ask good questions and then hear what they're saying, where they might need some, help or assistance from me. And then and think about like, oh, what can I share with them that might be, could make a difference in how they go about and do things. So that's one part of it. I do also, just encourage everyone to just do some free thinking about what their personal vision is. And, it could range, right? And it's not something like if you're shy about it, you don't have to really talk about it to anyone. But it is important because you're going to have a long career and your career is going to take a lot of different paths. And it's nice to go back and to be able to evaluate opportunities too, based on how you want, how you see yourself, how you want to live this independent life and so forth. Um, and then really the final note is this is really hard. And as I mentioned, has become much more difficult for recent college graduates to get great jobs. And so the more you can do to build up your network, to find the right mentors who can help you, and also, learning to plan, do some 9 to 5 planning. All of that is going to get you ahead so much more than, others.